Okay, so here is another creative mending technique. I have started this one already. I've done about half of it. I know it's hard to see the brown against the brown, but I wanted to use a matching thread on this. So this is in the instance that maybe we kind of have, you know, a rip, a snag, a weird sort of hole. And again, we want to be creative with how we patch it up. So what I did was cut a heart out of this kind of cow print fabric and pinned it down and started my stitch. This is known as a blanket stitch. This is done by hand. So I did half of it and I'm going to show you how to do the other half. So I have already threaded my needle. I have 4 strands of thread in here just to thicken it up, make it more visible. Normally to do this, or really to do any of these stitches, we might use embroidery thread, but again, we're trying to work with what we have access to in our house given our circumstances. So the first thing we're going to do to get this started, this stitch started, is we're going to start right on the edge of our fabric. Actually, I'm sorry, I want to say one more thing. When we're using this stitch, because we're using the raw edge of the fabric, ideally you want to use a fabric that doesn't fray. Fraying means kind of what it's doing here, where the weave is coming undone. Now, a way to sort of to help is we could back this patch with interfacing. Remember the stuff we used in our waistbands and our skirt projects? We would fuse that to the back of this patch, and that would help keep the edges from fraying and just kind of make the patch a little harder. But again, I don't expect anybody to have interfacing in their house, so we're just sort of working with what we got. So I have a knot tied at the end of my thread, and I've pushed that first stitch through the fabric right at the edge of my patch. I'm going to start my stitch. I'm going to go in. To start, I'm going to come out right where I started. I'm going to take the tail that's coming out of the fabric and wrap it behind the needle and pull that all the way through. Okay? So that's how we're starting it. Excuse me. My next stitch is going to pierce the patch and the fabric, right? So I'm going through both layers. I'm coming out right at the edge of the patch, but only in that single layer of fabric. As my needle, get a good positioning here, as my needle is sticking out, I'm taking the tail that's coming out of the fabric, putting it behind the needle, and you can see that's what's going to make that sort of squared off stitch. Okay, so in the fabric, the patch and the fabric, out just the fabric, take the tip of that needle, put that tail behind it. I'm going to take this pin out just because it's in the way for me. Okay, and now with going around the curve, I just need to sort of plan out my stitches, right? They're going to be a little angled as I go around that curve. You can kind of see on this side a little bit. There's a stitch here, 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 and here. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm trying to keep my stitches the same length. Oops. As in this stitch right here, I'm trying to keep these all the same length. Okay, so I'm in my patch, I'm out my fabric, put that tail behind it. In my fabric, in my patch and my fabric, out the fabric, wrap the tail behind it, pull it through. Get a blanket. Pull the blanket up over your feet. Sorry guys, kid interruption. Okay? In, out, wrap that tail around. Okay, and we'll be able to see this stitch a little better against that creamy part of the fabric. In, out, wrap that tail around. Now let's say you pull your needle through, you forget, right? You forget to wrap that tail around. No big deal. All right, let's say I do this. Okay, I pull this all the way through. Whoops, I forgot to wrap that tail around. Okay. So I'm sewing this way, right? My stitches are going this way. I'm going to push my needle in this loop the opposite direction. I'm going to push it this way. Okay? Right? I'm sewing this way. Before I close that stitch off, I push my needle through the loop the opposite direction I'm sewing. And I'm right back where I was. Okay? So in, out, wrap that tail around. I'm going to pick up the pace a little here just to show you how to finish it and not make a 30-minute video. Excuse me guys, I just woke up. Okay, I'm using 4 strands of thread, and as you can see, the tension, I have one of them is a little looser than the other, so I'm just trying to get that. There we go. Okay. In, out, loop around. In, out, loop around. So, you know, as you get more used to this, you could pull the thread, right? Kind of get in a rhythm. Pull the thread already behind you, so as you're stitching, that thread, that tail is already behind. So I'm going to go in this exact same hole I was here because I've got a pivot. Alright, I've got this corner here. Oops. I'm like, what's going on here? I forgot to go through my loop. No big deal. Just going to push that needle back through and catch it, right? Now, to finish it, I'm just going to push it all the way through. Okay, flip it over. Tie my knot. I'm going to grab a little piece of fabric here. One, two, pull it taut. Okay? Cut that off. There you go. Another creative way to patch up a hole. So if this was a garment, if this was a shirt, you know, maybe find a pattern or a print that's coordinating, or just a solid piece of fabric. But that's it. So this is the blanket stitch. And again, Creative Mending.